So this sock is one that utilizes the ribber in a 1x1 pattern and a 1x3 pattern. Okay, and you do it from the cuff down. And basically you start with plain knitting, then you switch to 1x1 ribbing. After 40 rows, we hang the hem. And then at one point, we do a couple more rows of knitting just for the pre-heel. And then we do the heel, and then we work the foot, and then we do the toe. So this is what it looks like if you choose to have the pre-heel added to your sock. And comparatively, if you choose to have a sock that's not as tall behind the ankle to allow for this extra space of your ankle, what we have here is one made without the pre-heel. And that's certainly an option if you wish a lower riding sock. What you're looking at here is fingering weight sock yarn. So it's really your call if this is a sock designed for you. So just to see what it looks like on the inside. Beautiful. All right. So that's pretty much the two socks, one with the pre-heel and one without. This just came off the machine, so it was cuffed down and it's finished with some scrap. Now this was not a hard sock, but due to the technical parts of it, it involves some extra steps. And as long as you follow those steps, then you should be fine, okay? It's actually not that difficult. I thought we could take the bonnet off together real quick. So with that, I have added the yellow Ravel cord. And so I've just kind of flipped down the cuff. And we're going to find the beginning, which should be on the inside, of my Ravel cord. So Ravel cord's awesome. Generally, it's a cord you can reuse and reuse and reuse and just pull on it to remove it. So here we go. Let's see how easy this is. Generally, it's fairly easy. Oh, there it goes. So here's the cord, done, reusable. And now we can separate it. Beautiful. Here's my scrap I'll reuse. So, oh, I guess I should show you the inside. So this is what that sock looks like. All right, so that's it. Let's start with the pattern. Thank you so much. All right, welcome to today's pattern. This pattern is long overdue. I introduced this as a Ravelry project back in January 2020. And since that time, it's kind of been on hold until I could get to it. So here is the cuff down, ribbed, hung hem sock pattern. All right, so we are going to start using our Chambord CSM. It is a AccuKnitter by Dave Lord in Quebec. What you're looking at here is a 72 needle slot cylinder. And I have approached this pattern and video, as I always do, in a way that hopefully is very easy to see. So I have my 3 o'clock in the 3 o'clock position of my video, the 12 o'clock, the 9 o'clock, and the 6 o'clock at my belly button. And my crank is over here. And whenever I start a new project, I always start at the 3 o'clock position. To use this pattern effectively, you do need to know how to use your ribber, and it has to be timed. You need to know how to transfer stitches from a cylinder to a ribber needle, and you need to be able to do what's called a hung hem. All right, these are all very simple techniques. If you need any help in any way, certainly ask. Email me directly, and or just check out the written pattern step that will match this exact video. I'm trying a new method where I have categorized each section in the video be a chapter and also the pattern, so you could find it easier step by step. How we're going to start your pattern today is we're going to start using all of our cylinder slots. So I want you to cast on using your preferred method at the tension you prefer and have all of your cylinder needles in work or being used, okay? Right now I'm at the 6 o'clock position approximately. What I want to do is I want to come from where I am at 6 and I want to go to the 3 o'clock position. As we start every project at 3 o'clock, and that would be the first slot after 3, I need to take my scrap and work it until that point. Our plan today is to start our project using one single non-overlapped row of Ravel cord. If you don't know what Ravel cord is, it's outlined on my website under supplies I like and under the techniques. You'll see it there. But basically it's just a cord that's easy to be reused that just kind of pulls out very easily off the machine later. What's really good about it is that it's brilliant colored, easy to see on the needles and on the stitches later. Okay, I've already cut my scrap yarn that you see that's going off camera. So I'm just going to hold it here on the left as it feeds into the needles as I gently go ahead to my start position for the next step. All right, so the needle just before the 3 o'clock on my side is down and the next one is ready. So I'm just going to take the scrap off. And just so you know, we do not intend to use the heel spring unless we are working the heel until the toe segment of our sock. So we are at our 3 o'clock position. Let's continue. We are going to start with the Ravel cord. So to do that, you just need a piece that's going to be able to go all the way around the machine without overlapping. Okay. So I like to feed my Ravel cord above into the yarn topper. And that's simply the name for the thing that's holding on to the machine tension above. All right. So there we go. I am a big fan of my clips that I use, the hemostats. They're 2.5 inches. Now you don't have to clip it. You can probably just hold it with your finger. But as I said, I'm a huge fan. I don't want anything to move unnecessarily. So I'm just going to clip it and let it sit there. Now I'm going to work from where I am. I'm going to go all the way around. Okay, so let's feed our yarn carrier. There we are. All our latches are open. All the weight is holding down the prior stitches. I'm coming to the yarn tail or the end of my Ravel cord. I don't want to overlap, so I'm at the needle just before 3. There we go. We got it. And I'm just going to take it off. You could certainly do this without adding a Ravel cord, but adding the Ravel cord makes it easier to remove it later. And if you were doing the toe, if this was the toe, it is not, then it's certainly much easier to find those stitches and sew them together if you're doing the Kitchener toe closing technique, which most of us do on a cuff down sock. All right, so we have our yarn ready. What we're going to do here, and now we're on step 3. We are adding our sock project yarn with a minimum 3-inch tail. So take your prepared yarn on a cone, hopefully, so that it feeds evenly into the machine. And some persons have said they can get away with using a cake, which is fine if that works for you. But in my experience, the cake does not provide even tension because it actually winds over the corners. But if you're able to maintain even tension throughout, then use what works for you. So, and we're just going to add it to the machine. There we go. And the first needle being the first needle after 3 o'clock. There we go. And I want at least 3 inches, which is about 3 finger segments. So approximately that. And just because I can, I'm going to unclip my Ravel cord, little clip, and just do the same with my sock project yarn. Because my buckle is so high up, because the scrap is so short, it normally would kind of just lay down inside, but that's what's happening today and right now. So what's the plan here? The plan here is to work 1.5 rows. We're on step 4. We're going to go 1 row and then move to the yarn carrier to 7 o'clock. So 1 row is back to here and then to 7 o'clock. So that's what we're going to do next. Alrighty, here we go. All the latches are open. Here's our 1 row and now to 7 o'clock. Perfect. The reason why we're starting with a row and a half of knitting is this is our foundation row that we are going to use this very first row of stitches later in the hung hem. So the next step, we're in the 7 o'clock position. I'm going to remove our clip so it doesn't get in the way, because normally there's a lot more space in there. Okay, we're going to add the ribber to the machine. Now, it is important that your ribber has already been timed and you already know which slot best aligns on the ribber to your 3 o'clock position area. All right, so get the ribber ready. This is the ribber setup, or ribber for short. And to look at it, it's a little bit easier if you put that ribber fin that's right there on the bottom and you kind of push it to the left, because it's going to be connecting with the part that's right here underneath that you can't see. And we want it to sit on this side. All right, so you may as well move that part to that side, just because with the fiber here, it's harder to move around easier because the fiber wants not to let it go. All right, so the ribber is on the machine. First thing you want to do is push your tappet to the left so that it connects to your drive pin. The head of my timing screw is touching the drive pin. I'm just going to hold it there. And now what I want to do is I want to move the dial this way. That way that little fin hits the inside of the cylinder, okay? So here we go. And I know my alignment's correct because I checked it before with nothing in the way or nothing on the machine. And you can see my little green mark is lined with my green mark. So what this is saying when you look at this is that my first slot that best aligns on my cylinder is this slot right here, best aligns with this first cylinder slot here, okay? And that's important because depending on where your marks are or your custom preference, if my marks were one set to the left, then it would probably better align to the second slot. And that just means the best way of aligning whatever slot to whatever slot right after 3, okay? So it sounds really complex, but it isn't actually. All I'm looking for here is my dial didn't have a mark, and I'm just trying to see the best way, where are any of these slots best aligning to either this one or this one. And in this scenario with my setup and my marks, the best mark alignment for a dial, ribber dial, is this one here to this slot here. That's all that really means. As everything is started at the 3 o'clock position, we want to transfer this first needle right here to a ribber needle and then repeat all the way around so that it'll be ribber needle, cylinder needle, ribber needle, cylinder needle, ribber needle, cylinder needle, all the way around. And that is what step 5 is, okay? We're on step 5. All right, so an easy way to transfer stitches and move things around is to put your cylinder spring, push out a cylinder needle, and now you have full access, and just gently lift it onto your cylinder rest. That's this part here. Now, if I want to move any of these needles around, it's a little bit easier. Having a stitch tool of your preference that has a bit of a corner to it, like this one here, helps a lot for navigating, lifting, and moving things around. And this actually is a leather awl, A-W-L, awl, from eBay that I've just bent the tip. It doesn't cost much, and it just fits really nicely in the hand. Use whatever works for you. So at this point, we want to move this first needle to from the cylinder to the ribber. It's very easy to move stitches around, but it is important that you load the ribber needles correctly. Ribber needles do not forgive. If you load a stitch behind the latch and you go to use it, it will drop it. So get your ribber needle. This is a ribber needle. It's shorter. That's what it looks like. And this is a rubber needle with the latch closed. So you never want to put one on the machine with the latch closed. You always want to have it open, just like that. It's actually very straightforward, okay? So what we're going to utilize here is transferring the stitch from the cylinder needle here to a rubber needle. Now you probably know how to do this by now, but if you don't, it's very straightforward. The stitch is going to be on this cylinder needle, and it's going to be somewhere down here. So all I'm going to do is bring the heads together, kind of tug of war, and I'm going to make sure the stitch is over here. And then I'm going to pull both of the needles together in their tug of war. So the stitch goes up that latch and then loads and sits right here. Not behind the latch, which will drop later, but right here in the needle, okay? Anytime you go from a cylinder to a rubber needle, you always have to leave that stitch right there and leave the latch open, okay? So this is what I'm gonna do here. So we want that first one after 3, here we go. And we're gonna do that tug of war. There we go. Because we are on our actual project sock yarn, it's very important for this pattern that we are transferring the stitches versus just loading the needles and going. It does different things to the stitches, and we want to use these rubber needles immediately. So by transferring the stitches, that makes that happen. So grab another rubber needle. We're going to do the 3rd slot now. Can you still see it? Yeah. Handshake. And then just move the latch over and the stitch, and it's loaded into the needle. And there you go. And just place that in the machine. So you're going to do that all the way around the machine, okay? And tug of war. Perfect. And load the machine. Now I'm doing the setup row, but I would, of course, very minimally move the yarn carrier. And so I'm just going to quickly do the rest of that. Okay, so now that we've loaded all of the needles, we're going to reset our row counter to 0 or 100, which is still 0. There we go. We need now the next step, which is the cuff. Step number 6, we're going to work 40 rows of this 1x1 pattern and then stop the yarn carrier at 7. By doing that, it sets us up for the next step after that. So we want to do 40 rows, okay? Make sure none of your latches have closed. Make sure all the transfers are correct. We're working 40 rows. It's 7 o'clock. All right, so we stopped at 7 o'clock. All right, so this next segment is actually very busy because it's setting up a few things at once. The first part, we're going to do a deep heel setup. Yes, we're on the cuff. The pre-heel and the cuff both require certain needles to be in certain positions. So this is the setup row. As I said, this is a very busy setup segment. I know you can do this. One step at a time. All right, so first part, deep heel setup. As the deep heel on this 72 cylinder is going to use 4 extra working needles. A little bit later, that's 4 extra needles behind the halfway points. Halfway points are here. So that'll be whatever is in this slot. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have a different cylinder or you want to add 3 extra needles, then make your own adjustments and just make sure you follow the correct way of doing that, okay? In regards to using the same numbers where you need to. So for this deep heel with 4 working needles later, on the first 5 needle slots, we want to make sure any ribber needles that are in that need to be swapped to a cylinder. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any ribber needles, these 3 ribber needles need to become all cylinder needles, okay? So we're going to do that first. In order to easily do that, we're going to put our cylinder spring on the rest because it's our thing to help you. We might as well use it. So these first 3 ribber needles need to become cylinder needles. So we'll start with that. Perfect. And as we are on our project yarn, we would not work anything on this side of the start at this time because that would be changing the row before, not the row we're on. All right, so then we do this ribber needle to a cylinder. Now it's way easier to transfer a stitch from the ribber to a cylinder because it doesn't matter where it lands as long as it lands on the needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is the 5th needle, okay? This is the first part. All right, so the first part, the deep heel, is set up for later on this side of the machine. Great. Now we're going to go to step number 8. We're going to set up these 1 by 1 into a 1 by 3. And we're going to do that from where we are here all the way over into a certain part over here, okay? You won't see it under the arm, but basically we're working like a mirror. So what we just did before, right here, after this step, we'll be doing here. So we only want to go this all the way over to a certain point, okay? So all you need to know is what the instructions say. So the instructions say, number 8, we're changing the 1 by 1 ribbing, which is this 1 by 1, to 1 by 3. So identify the current second ribber needle. 1, 2, it's this one. And from here, we're going to swap that needle into a cylinder so that we have 1 ribber, 3 cylinder, 1 ribber, 3 cylinder. Okay, so we're going to do that all the way till over here. All right, so we'll go a little bit forward. And of course, while we're here, it's finishing that last row. So that's why we didn't put anything different here, okay? That makes any sense? All right, so now the second ribber, which is this one here, becomes a cylinder needle. There we go. Again, so we have the 1 ribber, 3 cylinder, 1 ribber, 3 cylinder, and repeating, okay? So the second one again. Beautiful. And the second one again. And let me just figure out which ones will be transferred. These 2. Okay. This way I don't accidentally do the wrong ones the wrong way. All right, transfer. Yeah, because we're switching the pattern. And then we'll go a little further forward. And then a little further forward. All right, now we just want to make sure we don't go past our target. So let's just look here. Number 9, deep heel setup finish. Ensure the last 5 needles at the 9 o'clock position on the left are cylinder needles. So here's the 9 o'clock position. I want to count those. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's 5. So these 2 here, they need to become cylinder needles, okay? So we're going to do those. And it's because later on, the pre-heel is not going to have any rubber needles in it, and neither is the heel. It'll make more sense when we get there, but we have to do the setup now. All right, I'm just moving the cylinder spring with my thumb to gently put the needle butt into the machine. So now what we've done is we've set up all the positions and needles that we need from our 3 o'clock to our 9 o'clock. As you can see here, this means there are only cylinder needles within the first 5 cylinder needles. And then we switch to the 1 ribber 3 cylinder all the way over. And then on the left at the 9 o'clock position, counting backwards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cylinder needles. Perfect. So this section is done. We've done 7, 8, 9 right there. Now we're going to do step 10. Now step 10 is switching all of the ribber needles underneath the tappet on this side between 9, 6, and 3. They need to all be cylinder needles. So what we're going to do is we're just going to advance the yarn carrier. And we will stop at 12. Okay, so we have finished transferring all the needles. Make sure all the latches are open and return the cylinder spring back on to the machine. So at this point, bring the yarn carrier to the 7 o'clock position. There we go. We finished step number 10. All right, so at this point, we are going to remove the ribber. Now it's very straightforward. Currently, the only ribber needles on the machine are on the back, from here to about here. In order to take the ribber off, we need to put these in a way that the stitches are going to not drop and the needles can hold those. So an easy way to do that is to take each ribber needle gently, make it go upside down, and put its head in the slot right beside it that it aligns to, okay? So that's 1 needle, 2 needle, 3 needles, 4 needles, 5, and I got 6. Now I see that there's 1 still underneath, so make sure you don't try to remove it until all the needles are indeed off the tappet. So right now, and off the dial, there are no needles there, none at all. So now we take the ribber off. Just put it somewhere safe that you won't drop it. Nice to see we have not dropped any stitches, which is great. Okay, so this next step, we removed the ribber. We only did part of the removal and rest. We just removed the ribber and we leave the needles temporarily here, okay? Because they're marking the slots where the ribber stitches will be for the foot. I guess technically we could just take off the ribbers or transfer them to cylinder needles at this point, but to keep our alignment, it just makes more sense just to leave it like this. All right, so we are ready now to do the hung hem. What you see here, of course, are your ribber needles and ribber stitches being held. Now what we have is we're prepared for the next step. The next step is to take the weight off. And as a quick note, do not move the handle if there's no downward pressure on your knitting because you'll drop stuff. But we're taking the weight off so we can easily fish down inside the machine and locate initial foundation row of knitting. So now that we've taken off the pressure, go in and just gently pull the inside up. Let's look at that. Perfect. Now, because we chose to use the Ravel cord, it's really obvious which stitches we need to grab and hang, okay? So this is our start yarn tail, and it's telling me that this is our first stitch to hang. I suppose technically that would make it on the second needle to hang, because this is probably the first stitch and this is technically the second one, but being off by one is perfectly fine. So let's just be clear here. We only ever start from the first needle after 3 o'clock, and we have our yarn tail and our first stitch to hang. So we're going to hang this on that first needle after 3 o'clock. So let's do that. Because we didn't use a heel spring anywhere in this area here, it should be very pliable and stretchy, and we'll have no problems being hung because the tension's the same. Because again, that ravel cord's there, it is a very easy way to identify the stitch I need to hang, okay? You see that there. Try not to pull too much on the fiber so you're not making the tension uneven, okay? So I'm looking for this orange row, well, orangey, and I want just to take the single stitch, and I'm putting one on each needle. And I'm working towards my upside down ribber needle there. Again, you could make this part a little bit easier. You could have transferred every upside down ribber needle into a cylinder, but I'd like to continue using these specific slots as ribber needles, and I don't want to mix them up. So now that the next stitch to hang is this upside down ribber needle, I'm going to gently release that ribber needle. I'm going to temporarily make it a cylinder needle. I'm going to take a stitch marker I'm going to take that next stitch to hang right there, grab it, great. I'm going to take my stitch marker so I know which needles to move back into a ribber, and I'm just going to mark the ravel cord area exactly on that stitch. Perfect, good. Another trick I have, if you don't want to release all the needles, but just maybe a few, you can do a controlled lift by just gently leaving your stitch tool in cylinder spring. You can see there, this is the next stitch. Make sure you're not splitting it, that it's a full stitch and not half the fiber. Perfect. Swap it again to a cylinder needle. We are going to pick up this next bar with the cylinder needle. We are going to get our stitch marker, put it to work, mark that stitch that coincides later, excuse me, to switch it back, and then put the cylinder needle in the slot. Perfect. All right, so I need to move the yarn carrier from here to maybe over here, but I have to be careful that none of these latches have closed, because they have. So one trick is to gently lift the needles so that none of the latches were asked to close by them being low or the tension. Very important. All right, so if I pull down on the inside, I have to pull down on the fiber closest to where the needles are going to be working. Otherwise, things are going to drop, okay? Do this very minimally. Just make sure that none of the latches are closed, because we're going to move from here to here. And I'm pulling down and I'm going slowly. And make sure your yarn path is going to correctly go where it's supposed to go here. Okay, so here we go. Slow, slow, slow. Do not overlap your 3 o'clock position just yet. Perfect. All right, now stop. Great. So normally you wouldn't do stuff like that just because, but it just makes it easier to work on the other sides of the machine. I did not leave a long enough area underneath to put the buckle on. And effectively, it's short again now because of the hung hem. So there we are, it's on. I'm gonna add the weight. I do so by feel. Okay, good. Now do not move anything just yet because you have all kinds of latches that are closed. There we are. And you can help those just by gently lifting them just a bit. And because there's a sweet spot there. There we go. They will still work, but they're up a bit so the latch doesn't bounce. This is pretty much 3 o'clock. This is our start yarn tail from when we started our project. What we can do here is we can work it in. Now there's different ways of working your yarn tail. Some people do an E-wrap. I usually do. And I'm going to do it with this first one so it's nice and snug. And the E-wrap is just wrapping it all the way around once. And then I'm just going to weave it in and out because that is another way of taking care of the tail on the machine so you don't have to do it later. Ta. Maybe that's good right about there. And I can bring back my little clip so I don't have to worry about it undoing anything. There we go. All right. Now, because I hung the stitches from the first stitch after 3 o'clock, I don't have to worry about these needles here as long as the latches are open because it's the prior row still. So we want to continue knitting, finishing that last row. Perfect. And now the next step involves having the yarn carrier go all the way around and stopping at 7 o'clock. So we can go all the way over, maybe to 12 for now. Here we are. We want to make sure all our stitches are sitting down here. Now these ones aren't really supported, so the latches might misbehave. And of course we still need to hang these guys. And so we can actually take this off now. All right, now there's a lot of tension here because of the weight applied, so you can just support it by pinching it or taking the weight off to do this part. But I don't want to make this area elongated on the stitches, so I'm just going to self-support until I can have all those needles in place or all those stitches in place. Perfect. Use a contrasting color, use something you can see. All right, so I look here, it's a bit hidden, but this is the stitch right here. So look between the two, look between this, which was the start, and this, which is the end, and that is your last stitch to hang because it's the bar between them. Often gets lost, but if you know what you're looking for, you can easily catch it. So now we're all hung. All right, so our next step is to move this guy all the way over here. Perfect. And now you see we have all these stitch markers. They need all to be the stitches moved back to being rubber needles upside down. So let's do that. We want to have access to the cylinder spring, but we're not going to have full access. So gently just find your cylinder spring and put your stitch tool there. And just maybe release the needles that you need to switch into rubber. And of course it's the 1x3 configuration, so it's, you can check it to make sure you didn't mistake and lift the wrong dudes. So 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, perfect. These all need to become upside down rubber needles. So no problem. And just put it upside down into the slot. There's a whole kinds of stuff going on here. There we go. Now there's all kinds of ways to do so many things. This is just how I do it. And I'm going to take the stitch markers away once I'm there. Turn the bellies out. We no longer need this guy sitting here. Your job is done. Job is done. No stitches are twisted. Dropping stitches or needles onto the floor. Alrighty, there we go. Let's take away the stitch markers. Now we put the rubber back on. So now we are number 13, rubber return to the machine. Anytime we're returning the rubber to the machine, we need to ensure the dial is aligned to your 3 o'clock so that the inside of the component here, the rubber accessory, and the dial are connected and that the rubber needles don't drift or move around. Okay, so let's get our rubber and put it back on the machine. Again, we're going to put the fin, rubber fin, because it wants to connect on this side and we don't want to have to travel so much. In we go. First step is to move the tappet so that the drive pin touches the screw head. There you go. The second step is to locate the 3 o'clock position on your dial. So hold your tappet and push, oh goodness, it's locked. And push it so you know your dial is aligned to your machine. That's why we mark it ahead of time. All right, so now we need to take our upside down rubber needles and put them back into the dial. So for this, again, once again, gently lift your cylinder spring and put it back on the wrist. So we know the step after this is the pre-heel. So we can put our counter at 0 now. And we can either count the setup row or not count the setup row. You decide. I always know what I'm doing ahead. So I sometimes, on both socks, to make them even, start the counter now. All right, so we're going to put the rubber needle back on the rubber dial. To do that, I have a helpful tool, a cylinder needle. We've done this before, making sure it's aligned in the correct slot. And we just want to kind of handshake it left, or handshake it so that it loads the rubber needle correctly. And the latch is open. I've done this already, but you're going to be so good at this. And so there should be 3 slots between if you're using an equal slot rubber dial. Okay. Not too many needles to do this to. Making sure all your latches are open. Because from here to here, there's still 2 stitches on every needle. So you're finishing that last row, of course, while we set up the head of the yarn carrier. We're going to move it ahead. Latches are open. And we're moving these ribber needles because these are going to be the ribbing on top of your foot. Okay, and we'll do this one here. Perfect. All right, so the last rubber needle is transferred. We can drop our cylinder spring back into work. The next step that we're working on here is the pre-heel, which is now row number 14 or step 14. So we reset the counter. We need to work 10 rows and stop the yarn carrier at 6 o'clock. So 10 rows and then stop the yarn carrier at the 6 o'clock here. So that's 10 rows and then stop at 6 o'clock position here. And we're zeroed out. Good. Making sure all our latches are open. A lot of tension back here, so you might need just to make sure it's pulled down underneath. There we go. Watch your tension. Make sure it's not too tight. You want 10 rows. I'm just going to hold it so I can make sure it doesn't do anything. One more. And stop at 6 o'clock. Okay. Now we are ready to start the heel. I like to do the heel on my machine with the rubber off because I have full line of sight. Anything that made a mistake I can fix, and that it's actually faster because I can see everything. So the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to rubber remove the park and rest method. So this is a part repeat of step 11, but actually there's a bit more to it now. So the first thing that we're going to do with step number 15 is we are going to take each rubber needle that's remaining and simply put the needle upside down in its slot. This is what we did in step 11, but we stopped after doing step 11 there. All right, so the first thing we do is we put each rubber needle upside down in its aligned slot. Why is it over there? Okay. That's okay. Perfect. All right. And now that there are no stitches locking it in, we take it off and we have a look. Yeah, it's a little bit drifted, but that's okay. It didn't change anything. It's perfectly fine. So as you can see, this will be the continuation of the top of the foot. And this was the pre-heel on the back of the foot. We are working from the cuff down, which means the cuff's down there. We're on the back of the foot, the front of the foot, and we're going to work the heel and then kind of continue on the bottom. And don't worry if you see any large bars on your knitting, because when you actually wash your sock, things will kind of even out a little bit better. And in this scenario, it's just the alignment got a little bit twisted. So you can cheat and do what I'm doing, just kind of redirect your yarn paths of the rib stitches so it's more centralized on that area. No one has to know. It can be our secret. Just don't hurt any of the stitches. We're just nudging them. Over you go, buddy. There you go. Perfect. Okie dokie. So number 15 continued. The ribber is removed. We're not done now. See, in step 11, we stopped here and we hung the hem. Now that we are ready to do the heel, we need to do something about the belly out ribber needles, because if we leave them here and continue working the heel, these kind of protrusions are gonna clash with the yarn carrier. So here's the lay part of my method that I designed in the end of December or end of 2019. You just simply lay them on the inside. Okay, here we go. Laying them on the inside. They'll continue holding their stitches. I'm just going to go a little further forward. Good. There we go. And I'm just going to use my stitch tool to hold the cylinder spring and just kind of release these other rubber needles. Good. And we just want them just kind of sit inside. Let's put our cylinder spring back on, because if you raise needles with the cylinder spring on the rest, all kinds of fun happens. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up. Now we can raise all of these other cylinder needles. And then we also want to raise 5 behind the 9 o'clock position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Confirm again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is up. So what is happening here is there'll be 4 needles in work. 4 needles in work. Itchy nose. Okay, you would add your heel spring and you would add your heel weights, whatever those are. Heel forks, V-hook, whatever works for you. I'm going to use my V-hook. Apply it on the section we're working. Now, one of the first things people ask is, where do I place it? If you're using the V-hook like I am, we'll look at your heel marks. These are my boundaries for my heel, so I'll not decrease further past that. So I want that to be approximately where I put them on the inside. You have the marks, you just didn't know. Now I have that multiple layer thing going on inside. So just make sure you've got it even there. Perfect. There it is there. Heel springs on to take care of the slack. We're set up for our 4 behind each, 4 working needles behind each halfway point. Now we can move our yarn carrier from where it is to the 12 o'clock position. Then we'll be done step number 16. Great. There we go. Make sure all the needles that are supposed to be up are up. Make sure there's no things that can catch anything here. Okay, so now we're ready for the next step. Step number 17, the deep heel decrease. So we are going to work the heel, and every row that we do, the first thing we do is we lift the needle and then we move the yarn carrier. And we always, when we finish moving the yarn carrier, we want to move it past the 12 o'clock position. So we're ready here with our 4 needles down after the halfway on both sides. Everything is ready, our downward weight, our heel spring, we're good. All right, so first step always is raise a needle. Now, if you go to raise this needle and it doesn't pull up, then it's because you haven't gone further back, okay? because the cams are down here and they'll lock it into place. So that first needle is up. Now we go and work our row. And what we do on the right, we do on the left when it comes to the heel. So we are past 12, raise our needle, come back. Okay, so we've done 17 and 18. So now we're on number 19, and it basically says repeat the last 2 steps until you've come down to your heel marks, which are these ones here. So what that means is you're going to work all the way down to these marks so that this needle here is up. Okay, right between this mark and this needle is up, and then we'll stop. And that'll be the end of the decrease. So let's continue. So just because I can, I may as well change those weights and bring them closer up to where I'm working. Another question people have is how high up can you hang them? Well, about, like your finger, if you're pointing it, it's right behind it, about there. I mean, you will see. You don't want to damage anything. I mean, you have easy access. If you just do that, it's fine. So sometimes when you're working a heel or a toe, you get called away in the middle of doing it and you're like, oh no, what did I do? Oh no, did I raise the needle before I began my row? Do I still need to raise a needle? So one of the tricks you can do when you look at this is 2 things. Number 1, if you're on the heel, what happens on the right happens on the left. So let's look. There's my mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 needles are down. Here's my mark, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is raised. And it was previously knitted. So this one was raised. So I raised it, now we'll continue. Because now we're like, oh, got distracted. Did we raise that last needle? Well, when you look here, we see that this needle was knitted. It's always on the decrease. The needle that was knitted is raised. So that's how you know. So now I would, of course, come back. I'm now 2 needles away over here and 2 needles away over there. So raise on the right, raise on the left, come back. Last needle on the right, last needle on the left. We are now done the deep heel decrease. The next step is to do the increase. And this starts with step number 20. To do the heel increase, we're doing the no wrap method. We're going to lower 1 needle on the right. I want to point out the yarn path is going to go under the latch as it currently will be. So I lowered it. It's under the latch. It's over to the yarn carrier. And the no wrap method is used in such a way that it wraps the needle itself. And by the wrap that happens with just dropping the needle there and having the yarn path under the latch is it actually wraps the latch. It's important when you come to work the row. This is a great tip I just recently noticed. It's very important that you don't let the needle rise up and let the latch escape, okay? So what you do is make sure the latch is down, the path is underneath it. It's underneath it. And when you bring your yarn carrier slowly towards it, it's going to stand up. So all you do is once you can, there, push it down just a tiny bit, and you will not drop another stitch. There you go. Now, because the weight is not on the apex of the heel, let's put it there. Now this will sit better. So now we're going to do what we did on the right, we do on the left. So maybe you'll see it a bit better. So let me just redirect this. So we lower. So you haven't gone back far enough. There we go. Lower the needle. It's under the latch. See the latch there, and then there you're under the latch. And come back. And that needle's going to lift. And then just push down once you can. You will not drop it. If you want details on this tip, I have created just a video on that for clarity and up close explanation. I'll put it in the write-up of the pattern. You can click on it, and I'll put it up in the description of the pattern on the YouTube video. So what we did on the right, we do on the left. So now we're going to continue working back, lowering needles, and going back to the halfway marks, and actually more than that, because this is a deep heel. So we started with a deep heel with 4 working needles. We're going to stop the deep heel with 3 working needles. It'll make more sense as we get closer, okay? So our current target is the halfway marks, and then we will walk through what we need to do for the extra part of the deep heel. All right, so lower the right. Lower the left. Okay, so last needle before the half mark. Last needle before the left half mark, the 9 o'clock. Good, and we'll stop at 6. So let's just look what we have. We still need to work 1, 2, 3 on the right and 1, 2, 3 on the left. So we're going to count these down together. So let's finish that last row. This is first on the right. First on the left. Second on the right. Second on the left. Last on the right. Last on the left. And now note that last on the left, we stop at 6 o'clock or 7. So now we're ready to push down the needles as far as we can. Oh, cool. That's why we stop at 6-ish. More access. And now we want to put the ribber needles back in their slots. So let's see where we are. Ribber return to the machine, which is, of course, a repeat of step 13, because we are returning the ribber. So repeat step number 13 and the details of returning the ribber back to the machine. So we will put the ribber needles back in their slots. Perfect. Oh, there we go. And now we're going to add the ribber back to the machine. I know, right? On, off, on, off. Because the next step is going to be to create the foot. Zero out your row counter. All right, and now make sure none of the stitches are dropped. Okay, so 3 slots between each one. Cylinders ring back on the cylinder. Okay, let's have a look. Now we're on step 24. The foot. For my settings in fiber, I'm going to work 59 rows. This is 1 row less than the intended 60 rows. And I'll stop the yarn carrier at 6 o'clock. Our counter is zeroed out. Make sure all the latches are open before we get there. And just so you know, I did leave the weight under the machine, okay? It's still under the machine on that heel, because if you take it off now, that area won't be supported and it'll drop. Now we've done one row short of the number of foot rows we want. We have a row to take care of the rubber needles because we need to take the rubber needles off the machine completely now. So gently put your cylinder spring one last time on the rest. And each rubber needle becomes a cylinder needle. It's much easier to close the toe or Kitchener the toe of your sock if all the stitches are the same. And this top row will be the last edge that'll join the toe later off the machine. It'll make more sense in a minute. All right, so last of the rubber needles are now done. Rubber is done. Move the yarn carrier to 6 o'clock to finish that last row. Okay, so now we're ready to take the rubber off. And when we do that, set up for the sock toe. Okay, so there we go. We're going to raise half the needles on the back from the halfway point, which is there, there, and there. There we go. Ensure we move our weights from down below because they should still be on the machine. And we'll go to 12 o'clock. Your heel spring should still be on. And next step is the toe decrease. Step number 27. Lift the one needle on the right. Now everything with the toe is just the same on the right as the left until the decrease. So here we go. Once again, you'll notice I have not used or moved the heel weights because I can get away from doing that without dropping stitches by maneuvering it with my finger. All right. So we're now at one needle before the halfway marks. This is the halfway marks. Okay, so we are done the toe decrease. And now from now onward, things are going to be a bit different on this part of the increase. So with the heel, we did everything on the right, everything on the left, pretty much till we finished it. But with the toe, the everything on the right, everything on the left happened only on the toe decrease. So now we are on the toe increase, step number 30. First thing we need to do is, seeing our yarn carriers at 12 as it should be, we are going to lower 2 needles. 2 needles that we lower. Oh, and you'll also note that we worked, instead of right to the heel marks, we worked to 1 needle before. So there's still a needle down on each side of the marks. So let's do the increase. Here we go. We lower 2 needles. That's 1 on the right, latches down and open, and 1 on the left. So we're going to come past, make sure that latch doesn't escape. So I'm going to push it down again. There we go. Perfect. And there we go. Row number 1 is good. And now that first step was an unusual one. That's the only time we do 2 at once. So now we're going to continue with 1 lowered on the left. Okay. Bringing it down. Perfect. And now we're going to, what the heck happened here? Let's fix that. Something misbehaved. This is the misbehaved sock, just so you know. Alrighty. So we need to fix this because I didn't see the latch and it misbehaved. But it's still good because it's not on a decrease or an increase corner. Try not to split your yarn. All right. Find the live loop, live stitch. And of course it's red on red, so let's see if you can see that. All right, locate your live stitch and locate the stitch bar. Okay, there we go. So we see the live stitch there. And the next stitch that needs to happen is this bar. So I'm going to keep the live stitch under the latch and the bar in the needle. And I'm going to hold these other ones out of the way so you can see it. And holding them out of the way, there we go. Now again, it'll be underneath the latch. The next bar in the needle. Perfect. And again, while we lasso up this varmint. Okay. Try not to split your yarn. Very easy to do. There we go. Last bar is here. And we fixed it. Good. And load your needle. So where are we? We're going to lower this needle on the right. And we'll come across. And lower this needle on the left. So while yes, some of what we do on the right, we do on the left, on the toe increase. But what we've done here is now we've added an extra stitch on one side versus the other side. So we are going to come to the heel mark, the halfway mark sooner on this side. So this is how far we know to come, okay? So we just continue doing on each side the step of lowering a needle, making sure the latch wraps, work across, lowering the needle, latch wraps across. There we go. And let's just move the heel weight, because whenever you have done the decrease and you are about to do the increase, it creates a pocket. And if you don't put the weight right kind of in the corner, it's more liable to accidentally drop as things lift incorrectly. All right. There we go. And now we'll stop at 6 o'clock, lower our back needles. This was our last row, so we're going to stop at 3, just before 3 o'clock. And we want to cut our yarn source somewhere around the topper. And we want something vibrant and not like anything else as a scrap. You don't have to use a Ravel cord here, but if you want that brilliant color, you have that option. I am just going to use a really bright red. Okay, red is red, maybe not great for red on red. You'll see what I mean in a minute, but it's very different still. Okay. So make sure you don't drop any stitches. Latches are all open. Good. I always like to, even now, put stitch markers on either side of the half mark on the stitches. It helps me find them later. Make sure nothing gets lost when you are closing the toe. As you work across on closing the toe, called Kitchener, sometimes the tension pulls these corner stitches really tight and you may not see them and then you'll drop them. All right, same thing over here, both needles on both sides of the halfway mark. And just mark it. There we go. Try not to put it on your needles. The needles don't like that. All right, so I have had questions of persons saying, well, how much scrap yarn should I put after the project? Certainly you should put enough that when you've cut the scrap yarn, it's not going to undo and then cause all these live stitches to kind of fall away and be an issue. You want to make sure that you have enough. I mean, you can always reuse it. So a good 10 rows, never a bad thing. Stop anywhere. You're just on your scrap. It can happen. It doesn't matter how many exact rows you make. Okay, so then the other question I've had, how do I advance the project and start the next sock? Well, the next sock will be the second one of this. And the first row is knitting. So I don't have to change any needle formulations. It's the same setup. But what I want to do in my preference is put enough scrap that I can take away my heel weight and it's not going to add to the next project. So this is a pocket that is the toe and it's being supported here. So I want to have enough scrap that it's going down in the machine and I can put the buckle above it on the scrap. So that's my choice, because technically right now, if I leave the heel weight here and the regular weight there, and I start my next sock, then technically my next sock is the weight plus the weight, which this one originally didn't have. We always want to start and do the exact same things we did before. So if I want to have enough scrap that it goes down further that I can put the buckle on, I often use what I call spacer scrap. And it's just something else that's not the same diameter as the sock weight acrylic scrap that I've got here, which means the fiber is the same kind of thickness as sock yarn. And I just use this crochet cotton, and I can reuse and reuse and reuse and reuse. I mean, certainly I could use more of this red fiber if I wanted to, but I consider this thinner cotton as kind of second-class fiber, and I have so much of it. So when I'm doing a sock project, I want to make sure the same tension yarn is on the same project. So I would never use this very thin fiber on the row touching the final row. And the reason what I'm trying to say here is this is so much thinner. If I had it on that final row of sock yarn, then what happens is it makes the tension uneven and you won't easily find that last row of stitches in which to close the toe. So make it easier, be it like a hand clasping a hand, two hands the same, density the same, everything. Make sure the fiber is the same. So in this scenario, this is my spacer scrap. So I'm just gonna whack out a bunch of rows. I mean, generally I would change the needle formulation so it's less yarn and it just has big spaces. But I'm okay with this. I'm gonna reuse it. And I just want it to be down far enough that I can put the buckle on. So right now I see that I can take the heel weight off. It's no longer needed to kind of keep things in place. And I can bring up my buckle now. I'm going to go past the toe. And then we just want to see this spacer scrap. There we go. Let's see if we can do some rows. So you can see it's sitting uneven. I mean, certainly I could take everything off and cast on from scratch, but I don't want to. So why would I want that? So I'm just going to, there we are. Now I'm going to bring up the buckle. Now it's even. It's completely even. So this is like how I started my sock. The next step for this sock would be to turn it inside out and to do the Kitchener to close the toe. But I have a video for that and I will link it. And if you want to go do that, easy for you afterwards. Thank you and have a great day.